Hi everyone, I'm West Palm Beach Mayor Keith James. Congratulations West Palm Beach on 125 years. With a population of more than 115,000 residents, West Palm Beach is the seat of Palm Beach County and a significant regional economic driver. Ours is a vibrant and diverse city with a very rich past. As we celebrate 125 years as a city, let's take a look back at how we got here.
West Palm Beach today, a city with a booming economy, a city of wonderful neighborhoods, a city with a vision for the future, a city with a very rich history. In the late 1800s, the Seminoles, Native Americans who already lived in the area, were joined by a small number of pioneer settlers who laid the groundwork for our city today. They farmed, fished, and eventually built homes, schools, and businesses here. West Palm Beach historian and attorney Harvey Oyer's ancestors were among them.
My great-great-grandparents came here 147 years ago in the year 1872. In January of 1878, a Spanish ship called the Providencia wrecked about where Mar-a-Lago is located today. And amongst the cargo were 20,000 coconuts that my great-great-grandfather and two other gentlemen started planting on the barrier island, which a decade later would give Palm Beach its name, and a decade after that it would give West Palm Beach its name.
Early settlers built the area's first school, a one-room schoolhouse, in the barrier island town of Palm Beach in 1886. When that school closed, children were ferried to a new schoolhouse built in 1901 in West Palm Beach on Clematis Street and what is now Dixie Highway. Back then, it was where pioneer kids learned the basics as their parents built lives for their families on undeveloped land that lay between some impressive bodies of water. What we now call the Intracoastal Waterway used to be known as Lake Worth, an estuary where a freshwater inlet merged with the Atlantic Ocean. Here, ships carrying people and goods would enter South Florida. A few miles to the west, the twin Clear Lakes that now sparkle alongside Australian Avenue once provided a mode of transportation for Native Americans who traveled to the coast from their villages in the Everglades.
In the late 1880s, the tribe would come in with their canoes from the Everglades and rest their canoes on the banks and then trade with people in town.
They would come to the area that is today Dreher Park, and they would trade animal skins and so forth.
As word of the area's beauty spread, more settlers arrived. Among them, the man credited with being the father of the city of West Palm Beach and also the town of Palm Beach, Henry Morrison Flagler. The multi-millionaire railroad magnate and Standard Oil co-founder was scouting locations to build a new hotel, which would be connected by his north-south railroad. His grand vision? To create a posh winter playground for himself and the wealthy. Flagler had already built several elegant hotels in North Florida. Now he was setting his sights on the east side of Lake Worth. He built two luxury hotels on Palm Beach, with pioneering business people opening shops nearby. Contractor Vince Burkhart's great-grandfather and his family were among them.
They had been in the grocery business in Philadelphia, and they started a small grocery store on Brailsford Point, which is the current-day Flagler Museum. And that small grocery store and fast food place served the construction workers building the Royal Ponciana Hotel.
With Henry Flagler's railway extending south and a train station built in what is today West Palm Beach, Flagler started hiring more help to work in his hotels and homes.
My great-granddaddy, he was chosen to be a butler, and my great-great-grandmama, she was chosen to be a maid and a cook.
Robert Miller Jr. says his great-grandparents made the trip from South Carolina to Palm Beach on Flagler's train, with other relatives following later. Miller's great-grandparents settled in a part of Palm Beach then known as the Sticks, where African Americans and Bahamians who worked for Flagler lived for a time. But then Flagler decided to create a town on the west side of Lake Worth that would house his employees, their families, and those who worked for other wealthy Palm Beach residents. He bought up property and in 1893 mapped out a 48-block grid stretching from Lake Worth on the east to Clear Lake on the west, and from what we now call 2nd Street in the north to Fern Street on the south. The streets were named after plants like rosemary, hibiscus, and fern in alphabetical order. Then in 1894, Flagler ordered businesses that catered to workers to move off Palm Beach Island, prompting many to settle in what is now West Palm Beach. Some set up shop in the newly cleared waterfront area.
My great-grandfather, Lewis W. Burkhart, had purchased a lot in the newly platted town site of West Palm Beach, and he purchased a lot on Clematis Street. It was 207 Clematis Street, where he brought his little grocery store over and renamed it Pioneer Grocery. And we still own that property today as the Burkhart family.
According to legend, which is still debated today, workers and their families who lived in the Sticks, most if not all of them black, were told to leave too, in circumstances that to this day remain unclear.
Some people claim there was a fire, some people say they were lured to a circus and then their homes were gone, some people say they were evicted, or just general pressures, but it is known that they resettled in the Northwest and Pleasant City neighborhoods of West Palm Beach.
And while most Palm Beach workers were on their own in terms of finding new places to live, Robert Miller says his relatives had better luck.
Flagler gave my auntie and my great-grandmama land in West Palm Beach. One of them wound up on 4th Street, right off of Rosemary, and the other one wound up in Pleasant City.
Then, on November 5, 1894, a historic moment as residents voted to incorporate the town of West Palm Beach, allowing the city to grow and prosper. As the area continued to expand, so did the local economy. In the 1890s, Reverend Elbridge Gale, Palm Beach County's first school superintendent, planted the first mango trees in what are today the Northwood and Northwood Hills neighborhoods. Pineapple growers, including corporate growers, would also make their mark on some 6,000 acres. Those fields extended between Dixie Highway and Parker Avenue in neighborhoods now known as Flamingo Park, Pineapple Park, Sunshine Park, and Bel Air. Even though integration was the norm in the area's earliest days, by 1900, the segregation that had spread throughout the South had become the new norm here. White residents moved into homes in or around downtown, while the black community moved into the area now known as the historic Northwest, where they built a thriving community. Elmira Gilbert's parents arrived in the area in the late 1880s.
My mother was a prominent dressmaker around. She sold to some of everybody around.
What kind of work did your daddy do?
Worked for the city of West Palm Beach, Public Works, took care of a public park.
Over the next decade, West Palm Beach continued to grow. In 1903, the state legislature granted permission for the town of West Palm Beach to officially become a city. The Flagler Alerts Volunteer Fire Department became a professional unit and moved into its first permanent fire station. The town's first power plant began operating, and when fires demolished much of the downtown business district, shops were rebuilt to much more stringent building codes. Susan Lewis Miller's family was among the business owners in those early days. In 1919, her great-aunt, Mary Brandon, along with her husband, started the Brandon Transfer and Storage Company, which is still in business today. Mary Brandon is the namesake of this city park located on West Palm Beach's Maddox Street.
She took over the business when her husband Arthur passed away and ran it through 1953 when my father took it over from her.
Despite some setbacks when the 1926 Miami hurricane impacted the area, progress continued in the city. Pioneer families had established a private cemetery on South Dixie. Later, the city opened Woodlawn Cemetery across the street. The private cemetery land was then donated to the city to become a park, and the pioneer graves, most were moved to the public cemetery, but not all of them.
There were some families that did not want the graves to be moved, and my family was one of them.
When the park land was later leased to the founders of the Norton Museum, the museum was built over the remaining graves, which are still there today.
40 people still remain buried beneath the Norton today, including both of my great-great-grandparents.
Evergreen Cemetery on Rosemary Avenue in the Northwest was established in 1916 to cater to the African American community. Telephone service came to the city along with West Palm Beach's first theater. In 1908, Central School was built at Hibiscus in Georgia, later to become Palm Beach High School, Twin Lakes High School, then Dreyfus School of the Arts. More change was in the air as World War I put a halt to construction in most of the country, but not in South Florida, and certainly not in West Palm Beach. After the war, the Roaring '20s brought a building boom to the city with an influx of new residents and visitors chasing construction jobs and endless summer. A new city jail was built at the corner of Rosemary and Banyan. In 1916, Palm Beach County opened a new courthouse, firmly establishing West Palm Beach as the county's center of government and commerce. In 1920, Good Samaritan Hospital, the city's first, opened too. Then, 4 years later, the first permanent library. Taller buildings, many of which stand today, took their places on the city's skyline, including the iconic Harvey Building at 224 Datura Street and the Como Building at 317 Clematis Street. In 1923, the luxury El Verano Hotel rose at 100 North Flagler before falling on hard times. Purchased in 1973 by the late Mayor Helen Wilkes, it was renamed the Helen Wilkes Resident Hotel before being torn down and first replaced by a condo, soon to become part of a new multi-use complex. As the 20s roared on, the old Northwood neighborhood was developed, area churches continued to grow, and the first Jewish temple was established. Then in 1928, a devastating hurricane caused Lake Okeechobee to overflow. The flooding severely damaged most of West Palm Beach's buildings and tragically killed thousands of people.
Those bodies of the deceased were then brought into West Palm Beach and unceremoniously dumped in a pauper cemetery in the Stormer 28 site, which is off of 25th Street, in our unmarked grave.
Today, the site is a permanent memorial with annual ceremonies honoring the dead. Then came the stock market crash of 1929.
There was all that initial excitement about the building boom, but then the bust hit between the hurricanes and the stock market crash. There were a lot of people out of work in soup lines.
Despite tragedies and setbacks, West Palm Beach would see some positive milestones, like when baseball, the great American pastime, arrived in a big way. Spring training, minor league baseball, and the Negro Baseball League all began successful runs in West Palm Beach, with the Negro Leagues dissolving in the 50s and spring training leaving the city for 20 years before returning in 2017 with new home teams and a brand new stadium.
Welcome to the inaugural game.
The 1930s brought very little new development, but there were opportunities for business people. Penny Murphy's grandfather, Austrian immigrant Max Greenberg, operated a hardware and furniture store in the nearby town of Lake Worth. Greenberg had to pick up the pieces after the 1-2 punch of the hurricane that severely damaged his home and store and the Depression, which crushed businesses all over the country, including Greenberg's.
So once again, he had to start over again, and he decided that he would move to West Palm Beach, and he came to Clematis Street and rented this building that we are in today.
Switching their focus to high-end bedding and the name of the shop to Pioneer Linens, Greenberg's business is still family-owned and operated in the very same spot as when it first opened back in 1930. And that's about the time Bill Allen's grandfather purchased the now historic Nelson Building just up the road on North Dixie Highway, where he rented out storage space to a very eclectic clientele.
He opened up the Guarantee Warehouse, which was a mercantile storage and a storage facility. The Guarantee Warehouse was a colorful place. As kids, we would stumble through there, and there used to be a mummy up in storage we all knew about. It scared the daylights out of us.
During the 30s, a new National Guard Armory building was constructed, used by the Florida National Guard until the 1980s, and then converted into today's Armory Art Center, where students of all ages take classes from local artists. As World War II began, it was put to good use, as was Morrison Field, known today as Palm Beach International Airport. It became an Army Air Corps base, bringing thousands of servicemen to West Palm Beach. World War II brought blackouts and rationing all over the country, including West Palm Beach, where reports of German submarines patrolling offshore kept many on edge. Former West Palm Beach Mayor Joel Daves moved to West Palm Beach with his family in 1938. He remembers seeing signs of those subs when he was just 10 years old.
There were submarines that appeared on the coast of Florida during the early 1940s. They would torpedo merchant ships, and often we'd go over to the beach and there would be oil slick on the beach from torpedoed ships.
And servicemen who'd been stationed here or passed through the area remembered West Palm Beach when the war was over.
World War II was actually a big boom for West Palm Beach. Morrison Field housed so many soldiers, and they loved the weather. And then after the war, they returned back to West Palm Beach. Great federal loan programs and a big building boom.
Among the vets who moved here after the war to start businesses, Randy Rich's grandfather, who opened Rich's Ice Cream on South Dixie Highway in 1946.
My grandfather's parents had a dairy in Buffalo, New York. And so he grew up in the ice cream business in Buffalo. After the war, he came down and started his own ice cream business.
As the 50s rolled around, Paul Albert Dreyer, the city's first parks director, known as the Johnny Appleseed of West Palm Beach, started a park and zoo that was named for him in 1957. It added an aquarium in 1961. Many stores on Clematis Street were also renovated, and the street became the place to see and be seen.
I remember from the 1960s when I was growing up, it was lots of fun to come down here. There was several five and dime stores, there were 2 different movie theaters, there was great places to shop with little dresses.
But segregation still had its grip on the South, including Florida, and downtown West Palm Beach was no exception.
Unfortunately, Clematis Street was a segregated part of town, and African Americans were not permitted to sit at the same places or drink from the same water fountains.
Gwen Gilbert French remembers it all too well.
We could not sit at the counter at Woolworth's. I do remember that. I loved the hot dogs in Woolworth. I loved it. My mom would take me and my brother down. We did our shopping. You would have to stand up to eat your hot dog. We had a bus station that was separate. You had to go in one part. And I remember seeing the water fountains where you had black and you had white.
When you get on that bus, you got to sit in the back. If you want to ride anywhere, you have to sit in the back. A lot of vacant seats were in there, but you could not sit in them seats. You had to stand up and let them other people sit in them seats.
Senior Assistant City Attorney and former West Palm Beach Mayor Samuel Thomas.
The first African American police officers were no doubt hired maybe in the late 50s. When they were hired, they were not authorized to arrest white people here in West Palm Beach.
Thomas says the NAACP and local activists worked to reverse that policy and many others. Meantime, the historic Northwest continued to be a thriving African American community. Among the early prominent residents there, James Johnson, also known as Cracker Johnson because of his biracial heritage, a well-respected entrepreneur. Later, Dr. Alice Mickens, the daughter of former slaves, opened the home built by her husband Haley to African American intellectuals and students, as well as visitors who'd been turned away from whites-only hotels. The Sunset Lounge, established in the 1930s, was a popular nightclub hosting top acts such as Lionel Hampton, Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, and Count Basie. The Sunset also served as a prestigious venue for elegant events.
I was a debutante. I was introduced to society at the Sunset. The young man is holding your hand, and you're going to get your flowers, and you felt special.
Some longtime residents say early days in the historic Northwest were very special, in some ways idyllic.
We had all kind of fruits and stuff. We didn't know we was poor because we had chickens, we had eggs, we had coops, we had everything that we needed. My uncle would go out and kill alligator. We even had alligator tail.
Back then, black and white students went to separate schools. Attempts to enroll black children in a so-called white school met with hostility and violence. Despite the 1954 Brown versus Board of Ed decision outlawing school segregation nationwide, it took a while longer for schools in West Palm Beach to integrate.
That had to be in, 63, I think, 64? It was when integration started. All I knew is I went to a different school. There were white kids at the school. It was a new experience. It was different.
All the while, the city was growing, west and south, new developments expanding West Palm Beach, with 1959 bringing competition to Clematis Street in the form of the first shopping center, Palm Coast Plaza. In 1962, a new library opened on the waterfront at the end of Clematis, and with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, opportunities began to open up for people of color. With yet another set of back-to-back hurricanes in 1964 and 65, the city stumbled a bit but did not fall. A new police headquarters opened and businesses continued to grow. The 60s and 70s also brought the Vietnam War, a call to question authority, and right here in West Palm Beach, what some were calling Woodstock South. Palm Beach Atlantic College, later University, opened downtown, while segregated city high schools merged to become the integrated Twin Lakes High, years later morphing once again into Palm Beach Lakes High School. In 1966, Interstate 95 was extended to West Palm Beach from Okeechobee Boulevard to 45th Street, going all the way north to Palm Beach Gardens in 1969. The city's Hispanic community also took root in the 60s and 70s, with immigrants joining former neighbors from several Latin American countries. Developer Frank Navarro was born in West Palm Beach, but his parents and older brothers immigrated here from Cuba, moving into a home near family friends who were also from their Cuban hometown.
The way the immigrant community worked is they all helped each other, and the Hernandezes and maybe a couple other Cuban families, kind of banded together and were instrumental in making it easier for our family to settle here.
Navarro remembers his parents and their friends gathered around the table discussing politics and current events. Many of those families formed the core of a burgeoning Hispanic community, which now accounts for nearly 20% of West Palm Beach's population. The new arrivals came just as another change was coming to the area. The Palm Beach Mall, which gave way to the Palm Beach Outlets in 2014, opened its doors on Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard in 1967. It was the largest air-conditioned mall in America, giving teens a comfortable place to hang out for years to come.
I would get dropped off at the mall, and what kids do, just walking up and down the mall, shopping, having a good time.
1967 also saw construction of a new performance venue on Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard, officially known as the West Palm Beach Auditorium. Its unofficial nickname became the Leaky Teepee because the roof leaked when it rained. That didn't stop crowds from filling the 7,000 seats for performances they still remember.
The West Palm Beach Auditorium, when I was a kid, that was the place we went to see the circus every year, or to see Holiday on Ice every year.
The building that housed the auditorium is still there, but it's now the Christian Convention Center of Jehovah's Witnesses. And in 1969, Flagler Drive was widened from 2 to 4 lanes. The 70s opened with big changes for some school kids as Palm Beach and Roosevelt High Schools combined to form Twin Lakes High, with the Roosevelt High campus later becoming a middle school. There were big changes at City Hall, too, as the first woman mayor and first African-American commissioners were elected in 1978. Construction was completed on I-95, which now stretches between Miami and Maine. And the 1970s also saw an emphasis on the arts, as businessman, inventor, and media mogul Alexander Dreyfus helped form and chair the Palm Beach County Council of the Arts, now known as the Palm Beach County Cultural Council, and start fundraising for what would become the Kravis Center for the Performing Arts. Dreyfus and the council pushed for a referendum, which passed, creating a bed tax that still funds local arts. Meantime, music lovers headed to the waterfront for the first Sunfest, which is still going strong today. And 3 years later, the Palm Beach International Boat Show opened along Flagler Drive in the Intercoastal. It quickly became one of the top boat shows in the country. Meantime, a new city hall opened at Dixie Highway and 2nd Street, replaced years later by the current building at 401 Clematis Street. An $18 million bond issue paid for revitalization downtown, from the waterfront to the city library. And providing more mobility and transportation choices, Tri-Rail began service from West Palm Beach to Miami in January 1989. The $63 million Kravis Center had its star-studded grand opening in 1992. And the mid-90s also saw a facelift for Clematis Street with a new fountain built for kids to play in. The city's first strong mayor, Nancy Graham, talked about the progress made during that period as she joined city officials and former mayors Congresswoman Lois Frankel and Dr. Jerry Moyo at the West Palm Beach Green Market's 25th anniversary ceremony. The Green Market started during Graham's tenure and has been growing ever since.
The first Green Market, the first couple, we didn't have enough vendors. And some people on the staff suggested that we not do it, that we put it off. But I thought if we put it off, it would be seen as a failure from the beginning. So all these wonderful people that worked at the city, we went out and bought things from the store and resold them, and you never knew it was a resold.
In March of 1992, ground was broken for a new police station at 600 Banyan Boulevard, opening in 1995 and still standing today. Cultural events took center stage once again with the opening of the city-owned and operated Meyer Amphitheater. And in the mid-1990s, the start of another West Palm Beach waterfront tradition, Clematis by Night.
Clematis by Night grew very quickly. By 1997, we had record crowds down every Thursday night.
Those crowds are still coming out for Clematis by Night, as well as many other community events like the West Palm Beach Green Market, 4th on Flagler, and the Winter Holiday Sandy Tree. The 90s also saw the opening of Dreyfus School of the Arts, championed by Alexander Dreyfus, and opened in the renovated former Palm Beach High School in Sapodilla, which was built in 1908. And at the start of the new millennium, a beautiful monument remembering Dr. Martin Luther King was dedicated in Curry Park, while Vickers House, the city's community resource center, opened in the former home of the city's first black dentist. A few months later, City Place opened on Rosemary in downtown Southwest Corner with a mix of shops, restaurants, and offices. Continuing to evolve to this day, the newly renovated space is now called Rosemary Square. Both the library, now called Mandel Public Library, and City Hall moved to the current complex on Clematis and Dixie, with the old City Hall site to become part of an exciting new office and entertainment center. In 2004, the $83 million Palm Beach Convention Center opened on Okeechobee Boulevard across from City Place. Later, a Hilton Hotel went up right next door. And the excitement continues with business development, including the establishment of a financial district and arts and entertainment district downtown, the Clematis Streetscape project, making that downtown street more walkable and welcoming, intriguing new works of art and inviting public spaces, as well as new ways to conserve our natural resources. That includes our water supply. 23 square miles of pristine water at Grassy Waters Everglades Preserve on the city's west side, our city's water source, which flows into our brand new high-tech ultraviolet light water disinfection system and then into your homes and businesses. We haven't forgotten our history, and in fact, there are historical markers all over the city to commemorate life-changing events. There are also 17 designated historic districts in West Palm Beach, from the first local historic district, Old Northwood, which starts at 26th Street on the north end of town, with most homes built in the 1920s, to the tiny Bel Air Historic District, consisting of parts of the 200 and 300 blocks of Pilgrim and Plymouth Road, where early settlers built homes and farms from 1895 to 1939. And on the south end, Prospect Park's 1920s, 30s, and 40s eclectic styles, El Cid's swanky 1920s mansions, as well as the Mango Promenade District, one of the city's earliest upper-middle-class suburbs. No matter what part of the city they lived in, those who trace their family trees back several generations in West Palm Beach say they're very proud of that history, and even prouder to say their families have been here right from the start.
I want everybody to know that we ain't just come off the ship. You know, we've been here. We came on the train.
So here's to West Palm Beach as we celebrate 125 years as a city, with a wish for an even brighter future ahead. I'm Mayor Keith James. Thank you so much for joining me.